Welcome, advanced FACS students. This is your first lesson with cooking in virtual reality. Okay, so I'm going to start out baked potato soup by doing my baked potatoes. I'm going to scrub them. I use the green side of my sponge. Scrub them nice and clean. And I've got 4 potatoes that I've done this with. And then I'm going to dry my potatoes. Now, once I get them dried, I'm going to be lotioning them with shortening. This gives them a nice skin for the baked potatoes. These are going to go in an oven at 350 degrees for about an hour. You can hurry it up and make it faster, cooking at 400, but 350 for about an hour is the perfect temperature. All right, so the timer went off. It's been an hour on our potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check my potatoes to see if they're ready to come out. The way you check your potatoes is you take a fork and you fork your potatoes. And if that fork goes in nice and gently, then you know that you've got your potatoes ready. Now, I'm going to put these potatoes in the refrigerator. They're going to cool overnight and they'll be just perfect tomorrow for baked potato soup. All right, so let me talk to you about what I'm going to do today in this video. Very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make the recipe exactly how it's written, okay? If there are ways that we can adapt with different ingredients, I will talk about those, and this one's not one that there's much adaptation in. If you don't have the ingredients, you can just watch the video. There will be a Google Doc with some questions on it that you can answer, finding the answers in the video. That way, you still can get a grade on this. So there's 3 different ways. Number 1, make it just like the recipe if you have the ingredients. Number 2, follow the recipe as closely as you can, and hopefully using those ingredients, you can have some type of a soup. 3, watch the video, answer the questions on Google Docs, submit that Google Doc to me, and you'll get the credit for it. All right, so I've got my 4 baked potatoes here. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to peel them and cut them up. I like to peel my potatoes. It is not a requirement. If I were doing this for my mother, it would be a requirement that I had to peel the potatoes because she hates peeling. I'm going to do some peeled and some not peeled so that you can see both ways and that you don't think, oh, she's telling me I can do it one way, but she doesn't do it that way. These are the potatoes that I made earlier. They have been in the fridge. The reason I don't use potatoes that are coming straight out of the oven baked wise is because they're not set up like this. And as you go to try to cut them up, they don't stay together. That refrigerator time allows them to stay together and make it much easier. And they're still breaking apart, and that's okay, but it makes it much easier to cut it up, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and cube these potatoes. I like very small potatoes in my baked potato soup because I want that soup broth, that creamy soup broth, to just engulf and surround those baked potatoes because that's gonna give me more flavor. These potatoes are going to go into the soup pan and they will be cooked. One of the things about baked potato soup is you have to use way more salt than you think because your baked potatoes aren't salted, okay? But it's one of those things of add a little bit, taste it, then add a little bit more if it needs it. Don't add a whole bunch in because just like we say all the time in class, if you add too much, you can't do anything about it. But if you add a little bit, you can always add more. So these 2 potatoes, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to peel the other 2 potatoes. I won't. If I come across a bad spot, and I've had a couple of bad spots, got some black on it, I just trim those out because I don't want to eat that. Okay, now that I have my potatoes all cubed, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add my ham. Most baked potato soups don't do ham, they do bacon. I had some leftover ham from when we made our basic soup, and so that's what I'm using here. I also like using the ham because I don't get quite as much fat with my bacon. You can do this without meat if you don't have it. So there's all sorts of changes that you can do there. We're gonna go over to the stove and we'll add our milk and start cooking our potatoes and our ham. The nice thing about the potatoes and the ham is that they don't need to cook, they need to warm up. So we're doing more of a warm up than anything. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of salt so that I have a base with my salt, and then I'll check it later to see if I need more. So we'll add a teaspoon of salt. And I am on high because I'm boiling it. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a lid on it because that helps it to boil faster. Now we're gonna start with the roux. That's what this lesson is all about. It's not about making soup, it's about making what's called a roux. Roux is spelled R-O-U-X. It's a French word. It is a thickening agent. We can make roux with lots of different things. For example, in the bottom of my pan cupboard, I have a pan of bacon grease. The other night, I made a white gravy with the bacon grease. It adds bacon flavoring to my white gravy. I use that to make my roux. Other times, I've used sausage drippings to make a white sausage gravy for biscuits and gravy. I've used Crisco if I've needed to. Today, we're gonna use butter. It calls for a half a cup of butter, which is 1 cube, and I've already gone ahead and melted it for us. And then with a roux, you add equal amounts of your fat, which in our case is the butter, and equal amount of flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add my half a cup of flour. You'll notice, no heat. When you do this step after you've melted your butter, you don't keep cooking it. See what's out? Dance time, woohoo! We're using our whisk. I know, you didn't think you'd see that for a while, did you? All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna combine that flour and that butter. The reason that you do this is because it will take that oil from the butter and help it combine with the flour, and then when I add the milk in, it stays combined. If I don't add the flour to it, the butter sits on the top and it never combines together with the milk. So that's why we add the flour. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add my 2 cups of milk. And once I add my milk, then I can go ahead and I can turn my heat back on. I'm gonna use that whisk and I'm gonna combine the flour and butter mixture or the roux with the milk. Once I get this going and it gets warmed, it's gonna start thickening. And depending on how thick I want my soup would be how much I would cook this. Remember, this has got 2 cups of milk in it, but I got 4 cups here. So if I want a little bit thicker soup, I cook my roux a little bit longer. If I want a little bit thinner soup, I cook it a little less. The nice thing is, if I overcook it and get it too thick when I add it in, it's gonna thin out because of the milk surrounding my potatoes and ham. If I don't get it thick enough, I can go ahead and keep cooking my soup, and over time, it will start thickening up. Go ahead and pause. All right, so my roux is nice and thick, okay? And again, if it's too thick, I can add milk to thin it out. If in the end it doesn't have enough thickness, then I can go ahead and I can keep cooking my potatoes and ham and roux. So I'm gonna add my roux here. I did pretty much whisk the entire time, because if you walk away from it, then it starts really cooking on your edges. So use that whisk and kind of babysit it. Now I'm gonna go ahead, my potatoes and ham are actually just starting to boil. Let's move it to here so that you can see. They're just starting to boil, okay? Now, right now, this is just a potato soup. There's not a whole lot to it. In order to make it a baked potato soup, we've got to jazz it up a little bit. We're going to be adding some sour cream and some cheddar cheese, because that ultimate baked potato, that's what it has in it. Come look at this. It's got some nice thickness to it. Do you see how that broth is thickened up because of it? I'm going to go ahead and turn it off because I don't like it to be too thick. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my butter, or excuse me, my sour cream and my cheese. On this part, the only thing that needs to happen is it needs to get hot enough to melt my cheese. I've got 2 cups of cheese in here. I use a cheddar cheese. You could use whatever. And then I'm going to add, I believe it was a cup of sour cream. Oh no, it's 2 cups of sour cream, 16 ounces. 8 ounces is a cup, so I'm going to add 2 cups of sour cream to it. And that's going to help with that creamy broth to make it even creamier. It's going to add that bite from the sour cream that just gives it a nice little zing to it. Now remember, I only added that first teaspoon of salt. So once I get all these ingredients in, I'm going to be tasting it again. Cheese has some salt to it. And so I don't want to get it to what I consider to be the perfect saltiness and then add the cheese in, because that might make it a little bit too salty. And I always like to know that if people want a little bit more salt, they can add it themselves. I don't want it so salty that they can't add that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stir in that sour cream and that cheese. And what I'm looking for here is for that cheese to get melted. I can see a great big huge chunk of sour cream in there, and that will melt in that broth as well. It's starting to look good. It smells good. I think we're pretty much melted. Okay, now that we're melted, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take my spoon and I'm gonna taste. That actually's got just the perfect amount of salt to it. So, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead, dish up. Ooh, look at that cheese. I'm gonna come over to here. I had a little bit of leftover bacon, so I'm going to add just a teeny bit of bacon bits to it. Definitely got to sprinkle a little bit of cheddar cheese. Remember, we feast with our eyes first. So just a little bit of cheddar cheese. And then just to make sure that I get my greens in, I'm going to dice up just a little bit of green onion or chives. And if you've ever had baked potatoes with everything on them, you gotta have your chives. Now, that's your baked potato soup. Good luck. Hope you have the ingredients. Remember, if you don't, you can do some substitution. If you can't get ingredients for substitution, watch the video. I will put on Google Docs 5 questions to answer that can be answered throughout the video. you can answer those questions and then submit the Google Doc to me for your grade. Have fun, enjoy, and let's learn together.